So I don't know why a lot of you find me interesting, and because I think I'm boring as fuck. And a lot of you keep asking me for more growing up in Queens stories. So I'll give you one. It might be 5 minutes, it might be an hour, because I can talk. Let me tell you. Okay, so my story of the time I beat up a bully. Okay, so here's me, and as you can see, I was a total Guidette. What's a Guidette? It's an Italian girl with big hair and a nasty attitude or a tough attitude. But I didn't really have a nasty attitude. I was actually quite nice. But here is me on the left here with resting bitch face. Everyone always thought I was a bitch, but I really wasn't. I was quite nice, actually, and shy. And the funny part was because people thought that I was a bitch because I had resting bitch face all the time without realizing it, people like to mess with me. So I had just moved to Whitestone, Queens from Woodhaven, and it was a big culture shock. Basically, I went from the poors to the riches. And so my family moved on up, like the Jeffersons. I don't know if you ever saw that show. But so we went from a like lower middle class neighborhood, gritty, seedy, to $1 million house neighborhoods. Well, my house was the only house on the block that wasn't $1 million house in Whitestone. And we had a more modest home. And so we moved to this neighborhood, and I didn't know anybody. And I wasn't good at making friends because I was shy. So pretty much in school, I minded my own business and just kept to myself and was quiet. And so when I moved to this neighborhood, nobody had this type of hairstyle. I don't know if you can see this, but it didn't reach Whitestone yet. It was in Woodhaven, this big lacquered, hairsprayed, like almost hairband type of hairdo. And it didn't reach Whitestone yet. And so I was the weird kid. I became the weird kid. So one day I was walking out of school, and it was like the first week I started, and I was just walking home. And as I was walking out of the school, there was about 15 girls waiting for me. And well, I didn't know they were waiting for me until one of them pushed me, another one knocked me down, and they started smacking me around. And so there were so many of them. If I started to fight one of them, they would have all jumped in, and I would have gotten my ass kicked. Now, I wasn't much of a fighter. I was more of a lover. And so the principal, I don't know, it must have came to the principal's attention what was going on. So they took me inside, the principal and the assistant principal, shielded me from all these girls. By the way, I asked them, why are you attacking me? And one of the girls turned around and said, because you wrote something about so-and-so's boyfriend on the bathroom wall. And I was like, what? I didn't do no such thing. They accused me of something I didn't do. And I didn't even know the boy they were even talking about. So the principal ended up driving me home to protect me from this gang of girls. So I told my mother what happened. My mother was one for the type that didn't take any shit. And she said, well, why didn't you hit them back? I said, Mom, there was like 15 of them. If I hit one, they were going to all attack me. So the next day I was walking to school nonchalantly when I turned around and I saw the Pimp mobile following me. And you might be like, what's the Pimp mobile? My mother had a 1973 Lincoln Continental Mark IV. You know, those big boat mobiles with spoke wheels with feelers, feelers sticking out of the side. And you might be like, what the fuck is a feeler? It was this metal rod so that when you were parking, you didn't scrape the beautiful white wall tires. My mother's car was all pimped out with tinted windows, an Alpine system, and it was gorgeous. And so I see the Pimp mobile following me, and I'm like, fuck. Well, this is embarrassing. I don't want the other kids to see my mother following me to school. And so I went up to the window of my mother's car and I'm like, Ma, you got to go home. You're going to embarrass me here. My mother's like, fuck that shit. I want to see these bitches that fucked with you. And I'm like, here we go. My mother was always doing shit like this. So I was walking and she was driving very slowly as I wouldn't get in the car. I was too embarrassed. So I walk up to the school. She parks the car. She gets out. She drags me by my arm. That's humiliating enough for any teenager. And I was in junior high at the time. And she drags me into the schoolyard. And she says, show me which one of these bitches is the toughest. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't pick the toughest one out of the group. I picked one that was like my size. And yeah, I sort of pussied out over there. And yeah, the biggest and toughest one was probably about, she was like a He-Man, if you know what I mean. You know those He-Man women that are like 6 feet tall and like built like a man. And so I picked the one that was like equal to me. Her name was Tammy. I'll never forget it. Tammy Hessler. She was Irish. She had blonde hair, and she was tough as shit and nasty. And so I pointed to Tammy Hessler. My mother actually pushed me into Tammy Hessler and said in front of everybody in the schoolyard, "You want to fight my daughter? You fight her one-on-one, motherfuckers." So what did I do? I had giant hoop earrings. I took my hoops out. And in Queens or Brooklyn, when you got into a fight, you always took your hoop earrings out because you didn't want it ripped out of your ears. So I was pushed into a fight, and I ended up beating the shit out of her. Why? Because I couldn't make myself look like a chump in front of my mother. I had to beat the shit out of her. And I gave her a bloody nose and a black eye, and I was unscathed. By the way, my hair was perfect, and that's all I gave a shit about was my hair. The principal and the assistant principal came running out and told my mother they were going to call the cops on her. My mother told them, "Go ahead and do it, motherfuckers," and they didn't do it. And it turns out the next day I was the hero of the school. Everybody was surrounding me to find out what happened, and nobody ever fucked with me again in that school. And fast forward, like 3 weeks later, I was walking down the street in Whitestone, minding my own business, when there was this kid that was the same age as me named Larry. I'll never forget this fucking guy, Larry. He was really fat, and he was like one of the cool kids because he was into sports and all the kids played sports with him. But he was ugly as fuck, and his name was Larry, and he was like a lard ass. And so he was laughing at me with all his friends. I was walking down the street with this big hair. By the way, they were all laughing at this big hairdo because it wasn't in style. There's me on the left. There's my mother. That's my grandmother. Yeah, so as you can see, this fucking hair was a disaster. I thought it was cool. And so it had to be as high as the ceiling of the car. It was like Velcro. It used to stick to the ceiling of my mother's Pimp mobile. And it had to be hard as a rock. I didn't want the wind to blow one hair or one strand out of place. So what did Larry do? He thought he was funny. He thought he was a funny guy. So he was playing softball with all his friends as I was walking down the street. And boom, the softball hit me right in the head. And I saw fucking like the red blanket that you wave in front of a bull. That was it. The gloves were off because my hair got messed up. He hit my hair. And if anyone ever hit my hair, I freaked the fuck out. My hair had to be perfect. As you can see, now it looks ridiculous. I can't believe that this was the style. But yeah. So yeah, he fucked with my hair and I saw red. I didn't see anything around me. Everything went black except for I saw him. I ran as fast as I could and I grabbed him by his hair, threw him to the ground, started beating the shit out of him with my purse. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but I don't know if you could see in this picture. See this little blue thing sticking out? That was when I was using a plastic hairspray bottle. But in this occasion, in my purse was a baseball bat sized can of aluminum metal can of Aquanet hairspray. It was the supersize version, and it was like about 2 feet long. And that's how big my purse was. So I started beating him over the head with my purse and kicking him in the balls at the same time. And then all of a sudden I saw blood flying everywhere. And I was like, what? And his mother came running out of the house and said, "You sick girl. You're a very sick girl." Because he was crying and he pissed himself and all his friends were laughing at him. Turns out I busted his head open and he had to go to the hospital. And his mother was screaming, "You're a sick." They were foreigners. I think they were Israelis or Palestinians or some shit like that. And they were cursing at me in Arabic. And the cops showed up. And I told the cops what happened. And I thought I was going to get arrested. I was like shitting my pants. And it turns out the cops said, "Get in the car." They put me in the cop car and drove me home. And then I thought I was going to get arrested and get the cuffs put on me. The cop said, "Have a nice day," and drove off. So that's another story of growing up in Queens, New York. Maybe you want to hear more? Let me know in the comments below. But this fucking hair was ridiculous. But anyone that hit my hair got my wrath. And those girls, I wonder whatever happened to Tammy Hessler and all that, those nasty ass bitches. But I have to admit, I did have resting bitch face. They thought I was tough. When I made friends with people, they always said, you look like a tough girl. Like you look like a real snotty, nasty ass tough girl. But I really wasn't. I didn't want to fight anybody except for when someone touched my hair. Thanks for watching.